Welcome to Oxford Analytica's weekly roundup of critical events in the global political economy. I'm Tom Wales, Director of Analysis at OA, and I'm joined by Yulia Rusanova, who is one of my deputies and also is the principal motivating force behind our Russia CIS coverage. Thank you for joining me, Yulia. Our subject today is the withdrawal of Ukraine from the potential signing of an association agreement with the EU. This was regarded by many, both inside and outside Ukraine, as a critical step in eventually integrating the country into the wider European system. But instead, under heavy Russian pressure, Ukraine has opted out, which has led many media outlets to portray this as a spectacular Russian victory and a kind of major bloody nose for the EU. But Yulia, put this in context. I mean, should that be the way we think about this agreement? And why exactly did the Ukrainians make the decision that they made?
Indeed, Tom. At the end of last week, the Ukrainian cabinet announced that it is planning to suspend its talks about the association agreement, which was due to be signed today or tomorrow at Vilnius at the Eastern Partnership Summit. Instead, they said they're planning to renew talks with the customs union, Russia-led customs union, about improving trade relations with them. Now, Ukraine has been bargaining with Russia and the EU over the past months, trying to extract the most advantageous package for itself. And the EU offer, which was on the table, wasn't quite up to par to what Ukrainians were expecting. It was quite high on rhetoric about long-term benefits to Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian politics, of closer EU association. At the same time, it had virtually no tangible short-term economic benefits that could be extended. Moreover, it had very stringent demands on Ukrainian political system as far as the potential release of imprisoned Premier Yulia Tymoshenko. And it also required Ukraine to implement certain regulatory changes, which would have costed billions of dollars, hundreds of billions, according to some Ukrainian estimates. Russia, on the other hand, was able to use both a stick and carrot approach, in the sense that, on the one hand, they demonstrated back in August that if they wanted to, they could close its borders to Ukrainian trade, which would have a very negative impact on the local producers. They did that with a confectionery firm, Rochen, in August for just a few days. But nonetheless, even then, people got into a panic. At the same time, they made at least an implicit suggestion that should Ukraine abandon association agreement talks, Russia would be willing to lower its gas prices to the country. It's an extremely important consideration for Ukraine, which currently pays close to $500 per million cubic meters of Russian gas. Now, two main factors driving Ukrainian decisions. So one, obviously, economic. Ukraine owes about $15 billion in debt repayments due over the next 2 years. That's an extremely high number, which the economy wouldn't be able to sustain without some sort of financial assistance. At the same time, there is a very strong political factor to it. In 2015, we have the presidential election coming up. And the president certainly realized that should he go ahead with the agreement, the cost to the economy would be immediate.
The economy would basically tank.
Exactly. And this more than jeopardizes his chances for re-election. So that was obviously a very big consideration as well.
Now, how should we then consider the way a kind of foreign, maybe non-Russian investor should react to this decision? Does this signal that Ukraine has been sort of firmly snatched back within the Russian sphere, and that talks with the EU are sort of permanently off the table? There's going to be no sort of regulatory or other convergence with the EU. How should an investor perceive this series of events?
Yeah, thus far, the investor community has perceived it largely as a positive event. We can see this in the markets already. Positive, why? Because right now investors are primarily concerned with short-term risks. And the decision to suspend the association agreement talks immediately lessens significantly the risk of default. And that was the biggest worry of Ukrainian default as soon as 3 to 6 months from now. At the same time, I mean, longer-term considerations are, of course, in place. But I think at this point, few people see it, or at least we shouldn't look at it as a definite end to any negotiation talks with the EU. Ukraine said it explicitly themselves. They said they plan to restart talks as early as next year. I think more likely they might do so in 2015, or at least closer to 2015, when the impact on the economy won't again jeopardize the president's chances for re-election.
So Yulia, clearly quite a few Ukrainians are very unhappy with this decision. We've seen demonstrations in Kiev and other cities in favor of the association agreement. It's disappointed the aspirations of a lot of ordinary Ukrainians. But can we say that EU membership over the very long term, or an association agreement as a prelude to that, is firmly off the cards? Or what's going on here long term as Ukraine tries to balance between these two poles, Russia on the one hand and the EU on the other?
Indeed, we have seen quite a few protests in Ukraine after the announcement, largely driven by the fact that over the past few months there has been a heavy media campaign in the country which suggested that should Ukraine sign the association agreement, they're virtually guaranteed an EU membership in the near future. In reality, this was never on the table, even implicitly. EU is not in any way in a position to offer Ukraine membership. At the same time, of course, it played well into the hands of Ukrainian elites, who are at the end the main winners of the current situation, that the people would support this as they decide to go ahead with, as they have been thinking about going ahead with the agreement up until the last moment.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Yulia, and thank you for joining us. Please join us again next week for another look at OA's Global Political Economy Outlook.